The great council chamber of the Zephyrian Empire stretched across 3 football fields and rose higher than most buildings on Earth. The walls were made of crystal that sparkled with 1,000 colors, and the ceiling showed the night sky of the homeworld Zephyria Prime. In the center of this massive room sat the most powerful beings in the galaxy. General Vox was the most feared warrior in known space. His body was covered in dark green scales that had turned black around old battle scars. His forearms each ended in claws that could cut through steel, and his eyes glowed red when he was angry, which was most of the time. He had conquered more worlds than any other general in Zephyrian history, and his name made entire species surrender before he even arrived today. He sat on his throne of black crystal-looking board as he listened to the daily reports from across the Empire. The usual things: tribute from conquered worlds, new slave species being processed, reports of minor rebellions being crushed. Everything was normal until Ambassador Krell walked into the chamber. Krell was a Viridian, which meant he looked like a tall, thin human, but with 4 arms and skin that changed colors based on his emotions. Right now his skin was flickering between yellow and orange, which meant he was very nervous. The Viridians had been merchants and traders for thousands of years. They were peaceful people who had never fought a war in their entire history. As Krell approached the throne, his skin turned bright yellow, which meant he was terrified. The other members of the War Council noticed this and started laughing. The Viridians were known for being afraid of everything, so this was not unusual. Commander Zale, who was General Vox second in command, was a smaller version of his boss with lighter green scales and only 2 arms. He had been in hundreds of battles and had never seen anything that truly scared him. He looked at Krell with amusement. Admiral Thrak commanded the space fleets and had destroyed entire solar systems. His species, the Korathi, were born in the cold depths of space and had no emotions except anger and hunger. He rarely spoke, but when he did, everyone listened. Captain Morth was the youngest member of the council, but had already proven himself by crushing 7 rebellions in a single year. His species, the Draknari, were known for their cruelty and their love of causing pain. General Vox raised one of his massive hands, and the chamber became silent. His voice was like thunder rolling across mountains, deep and powerful and filled with authority. Great Empire Krell began, his voice shaking like a leaf in the wind. We must speak about the humans. They are not like other species. They are dangerous beyond measure. The reaction was immediate. The entire War Council burst into laughter. The sound echoed through the crystal chamber like a storm. Commander Zale actually fell off his chair laughing. Admiral Thrak made a sound that might have been laughter, though it sounded more like grinding metal. Captain Morth was laughing so hard that tears ran down his face. General Vox stood up slowly. His massive frame cast shadows across the chamber, and his red eyes began to glow. The laughter stopped immediately when the general stood up. Everyone paid attention. Little Viridian, he said, his voice filled with contempt. Your people have been merchants and traders for thousands of years. You know nothing of war. These humans live on a single world. At the edge of our territory, they have no great fleets, no planet-killing weapons. They are primitive. But General Krell pleaded, his skin now flashing desperate red patterns. They survived their own world. Do you know what Earth is like? It is a death world. Everything there tries to kill everything else. The humans did not just survive, they became the top predator. They conquered their entire planet. The War Council erupted in laughter again. Commander Zale wiped tears from his eyes. One world, he said between laughs. We have conquered dozens of species that controlled multiple star systems. These humans are nothing. Krell skin was now cycling through every color his species could produce, which meant he was experiencing every emotion at once. Please listen to me. Other species run from their predators. Humans chase theirs down until they die of exhaustion. Other species avoid their planet's dangers. Humans seek them out for fun. General Vox was getting angry. Now his scales were turning darker, and his claws were extending. They jumped from cliffs with fabric wings. Krell continued desperately. They swim in waters filled with creatures that can tear them apart. They climb mountains that can freeze them solid. They do these things not because they have to, but because they want to. The council members looked at each other with confusion. What kind of species would do dangerous things for entertainment? It made no sense to them, but Krell was not finished. There's more, he said, his voice getting Haya with panic. When other species face a stronger enemy, they surrender, or they run away. Humans do neither. When they face a stronger enemy, they study it. They learn from it, they find its weaknesses, then they attack. Admiral Thrax spoke for the first time, his voice like ice cracking. All species do this. It is basic military strategy. No, Krell said, shaking his head frantically. Other species do this when they think they can win. Humans do this when they know they will lose. They fight not because they can win, but because they refuse to lose. There is a difference. Captain Morth leaned forward, his cruel face showing interest. What do you mean refuse to lose? Scroll skin turned the deepest blue. His species could produce the color of absolute truth. I have studied their history. They have fought wars that lasted decades where neither side could win. They have fought battles where they were outnumbered 100-1 and still attacked. They have a saying on their world, never give up. Never surrender. The chamber was quieter now, but General Vox was not impressed, so they are stubborn. This is not unusual. Many species fight to the last warrior. You do not understand. Krell said, his voice now barely a whisper. They do not fight to the last warrior. They fight beyond the last warrior. They fight with broken weapons and empty hands. They fight when they are starving and bleeding. They fight when their cities are burning and their families are dead. They fight because fighting is what they are. The silence in the chamber was complete now. Everyone was staring at the small Viridian, who was now glowing with patterns they had never seen before. Their entire planet tried to kill them for millions of years. Krell continued. Ice ages that froze everything, volcanoes that buried continents, diseases that killed 9 out of 10, floods that covered the land, earthquakes that split the ground, natural disasters that would have ended any other species. And what did the humans do? They adapted. They survived. They grew stronger. General Vox was no longer laughing, but he was still not convinced. One planet, he said, we have conquered 73 worlds. Our ships are the size of moons. Our weapons can crack planets in half. What could possibly threaten us? Skrull looked up at the massive general with eyes that held ancient sadness. You ask what could threaten you? I will tell you. A species that looks at your moon-sized ships and thinks, how can we capture those? A species that sees your planet cracking weapons and thinks, how can we build better ones? A species that faces your 73-world empire and thinks, this looks like fun. The War Council was completely silent now. The only sound was the humming of the crystal walls. Please, Krell said, his skin now flashing the colors of desperation. Do not attack them. Find another species to conquer. Leave the humans alone. They are not what they seem. But General Vox had heard enough. He raised his massive frame to its full height, and his voice filled the chamber like an earthquake. Enough. We have heard your warnings, merchant. The Empire has decided. We will add Earth to our collection. It will take perhaps a week. Roll skin turned the deepest black. His species could produce the color of mourning and death. Then you have doomed us all, he whispered. The words echoed through the crystal chamber like a prophecy of doom. But the War Council was already making plans. They would send the First Fleet, the most powerful military force in galactic history, 500 ships, each one carrying enough firepower to level a continent. It would be the easiest conquest in Imperial history, or so they thought as Ambassador Krell left the chamber, his skin still black as the space between stars. He sent a message to his homeworld telling them to prepare for refugees. The galaxy was about to learn why the humans were the most dangerous species that had ever lived. The warning had been given, it had been ignored. The war was about to begin. 6 months after the first battle, the Zephyrian Empire was facing something they had never experienced before in their 10,000-year history. A species that got stronger the longer they fought. The war that Admiral Kairos had expected to last a few days had become a grinding nightmare that consumed ships and lives on both sides. The human fleet had grown from 18 ships to over 300. Most of them were still converted civilian vessels, but they were now armed with weapons. That made Admiral Kairos wake up in cold sweats. The humans had taken every piece of alien technology they could find and somehow made it better. Lieutenant Commander Jin Su Hyan piloted her fighter, the Taiguk, through the asteroid field that surrounded what used to be Mars Orbital Defense Station. The battle for Mars had lasted 3 weeks and had cost both sides thousands of lives. But the humans had learned something valuable from every death. Her ship was a masterpiece of human engineering and alien technology combined. The hull was made from captured Zephyrian armor. but the humans had found a way to make it lighter and stronger. The weapons were based on alien plasma cannons, but fired twice as fast and hit 3 times harder the engines. Used Zephyrian antimatter but generated 50% more power. Phoenix Squadron, this is base control. Jin Su Hyun heard through her helmet. We have identified the enemy flagship. The Dominator Admiral Kairos is aboard. Begin attack. Run. Jin Su Hyun smiled the same cold smile that had begun to appear in Zephyrian nightmares. Understood. Base control. All Phoenix fighters follow my lead. The Zephyrians had learned to fear human fighter pilots more than anything else in the galaxy. Other species flew their ships like they were precious works of art that should never be scratched. Humans flew their ships like they were weapons that existed only to destroy the enemy. What made human pilots truly terrifying was their willingness to die for the smallest advantage. They would fly straight into enemy fire if it meant getting one good shot. They would ram their fighters into capital ships if it meant taking out a critical system. They treated their own lives as ammunition to be spent. Wisely but spent nonetheless. Admiral Kairos watched the human fighters approach on his tactical display. 24 small ships against his massive flagship and its escort fleet. It should have been easy. Fire all weapons, he ordered. Destroy them before they get close. The Zephyrian ships opened fire with everything they had: plasma cannons that could melt asteroids, energy beams that could cut through battleship armor, missile swarms that could level cities, all of it focused on 24 human fighters. But something had changed. The human pilots were no longer the desperate amateurs they had been 6 months ago. They moved through the enemy fire like dancers, avoiding every shot with precise, calculated movements they had learned to read Zephyrian tactics, and now they could predict every move the enemy made. Jin Su Hyun dove her fighter beneath the Dominator's main guns and fired a spread of missiles directly into the ship's shield generators. The explosion lit up space like a second sun. All fighters, this is Phoenix Leader. Primary shields are down. Hit them with everything. The human fighters swarmed over the massive Zephyrian flagship like angry wasps. Each pilot knew exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. They had studied the ship designs for months and knew every weakness, every vulnerable spot, every critical system on Earth. The war had transformed human civilization completely. Every factory that had once made cars or computers or furniture was now producing weapons. Every scientist who had once worked on peaceful projects was now developing new ways to kill aliens. Every child who had once played games was now training to fight. Dr. Kong Min Young stood in her laboratory surrounded by captured Zephyrian technology and human improvements. Over the past months, she had led the team that reverse-engineered alien weapons and made them deadlier. The plasma rifle in her hands was based on Zephyrian technology, but it was completely superior to the original alien plasma rifle. She explained to her team of engineers, took 4 seconds to recharge between shots and had a maximum range of 200 meters. Our version recharges in 1 second and has a range of 500 meters. We have also increased the power output by 300%. What terrified the Zephyrians most was the speed of human adaptation. Weapons that had been effective against human ships last week were useless this week. Tactics that had worked last month were now being used against them by human commanders who had studied every battle and learned from every defeat. The humans were not just fighting a war, they were studying it. They treated every battle like a laboratory experiment, every casualty like a source of data, every defeat like a lesson to be learned. The Zephyrians had superior technology, but the humans had something far more dangerous: the ability to learn from failure faster than any species in galactic history. General Vox stood in his command center on Zephyria Prime, staring at reports from the front lines that seemed impossible. The human fleet had grown from hundreds of ships to thousands. Their weapons had evolved from primitive projectiles to energy systems that outperformed Imperial technology. Their tactics had changed from desperate last stands to coordinated strikes that devastated Zephyrian forces. How is this possible? He demanded from his staff. They have been in space for less than a century. We have been a spacefaring civilization for 10,000 years. His aide, a nervous young officer named Tesh, consulted his reports. Sir, our scientists believe the humans possess something they call adaptation pressure. The more stress we put on them, the faster they evolve. The General scaled face went pale. Evolve? You mean they are actually changing, not physically, sir? But their technology, their tactics, their entire approach to warfare is evolving at an unprecedented rate. Every attack we make teaches them something new. Every battle makes them stronger. As if to prove the point, alarms began blaring throughout the command center. A human strike force had appeared behind their lines using stealth technology that had not existed a week ago. The attack was surgical, precise and devastating. 3 Zephyrian supply depots were destroyed in less than an hour. Commander On Jae-min led the assault from the bridge of his ship. The Soul's Revenge, the vessel, had been built from the hull of a captured Zephyrian cruiser, but every system had been replaced with human improvements. It was faster, more maneuverable, and more deadly than anything in the Imperial fleet. Tall ships. Remember the plan he broadcast to his strike force: fast, precise, and leave nothing standing. We are not here to fight, we are here to win. The attack on the Zephyrian supply convoy was a masterpiece of human tactical thinking. The humans had studied Imperial logistics for months and knew exactly when and where the enemy would be most vulnerable. They struck without warning, destroyed their targets, and vanished into hyperspace before reinforcements could arrive. The battle lasted exactly 43 minutes. When it was over, 3 major supply depots were gone along with their escorts, and the human fleet had suffered 0 casualties. It was the kind of victory that would have been impossible at the beginning of the war. For the first time since the invasion began, General Vox began to understand what the Viridian ambassador had tried to warn them about. The humans were not just another species to be conquered. They were something new, something that had never existed in the galaxy before, a species that refused to lose. The reports from the front lines painted a picture that chilled the blood of every Zephyrian commander. Human soldiers who fought for days without rest. Human ships that continued attacking even after their life support systems failed. Human colonies that would rather destroy themselves than surrender. But worst of all were the reports about human prisoners. The few Zephyrians who had been captured and later released told stories that seemed like nightmares. The humans did not torture their prisoners or execute them. Instead, they studied them. They asked questions about Zephyrian technology, tactics, culture, psychology. They were learning everything they could about their enemies. Captain Li Yun-ji commanded the human battleship King Sejong from the bridge of what had once been the Zephyrian dreadnought. Destroyer of Worlds, the ship had been captured 6 months ago, completely redesigned and fitted with weapons that made it more powerful than any vessel in the Imperial fleet. The irony was not lost on anyone. The ship that had once been used to destroy human colonies was now being used to liberate alien worlds from Zephyrian control. Her tactical officer reported, "We are detecting a Zephyrian fleet approaching." 47 ships led by their newest flagship, the Annihilator. Li Yun-ji smiled. Just 47, they are not trying very hard anymore. The war had changed both species, but in completely different ways. The Zephyrians had become cautious, afraid to engage unless they had overwhelming numbers. They had learned to fear human unpredictability. And now they hesitated before every attack. The humans had become more aggressive with each passing month. They had learned that the Zephyrians could be beaten. And now they actively sought out enemy fleets to destroy. They no longer fought defensive battles. They hunted their enemies across the galaxy. The battle for the Kepler system lasted 2 days. When it was over, the Zephyrian fleet was destroyed and the human fleet had captured enough technology to build 50 new ships. The Empire was learning a hard lesson about fighting humans. Every victory the Zephyrians achieved was temporary. Every defeat they suffered was permanent. The humans learned from their losses. 3 months after Ambassador Krell had given his warning, the Zephyrian First Fleet arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system. The sight was terrifying. 500 massive warships, each one the size of a small moon, hanging in space like dark metal giants. Each ship carried enough weapons to destroy entire continents, and together they formed the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Kairos stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion, looking out at the small blue planet that would soon belong to the Empire. He was tall, even for a Zephyrian, with silver scales and cold blue eyes that had seen 1,000 worlds burn. His career had been built on quick victories and total destruction. He expected this conquest to be over before lunch. The human planet looked so peaceful, from space blue oceans, white clouds, green and brown continents. It was hard to believe that anything dangerous could come from such a small world. The Admiral had read the reports about Earth, one species, 7 billion individuals, primitive technology, barely capable of space travel. It should have been the easiest victory in Imperial history, sir, his communications officer reported. We are receiving signals from the planet multiple languages, thousands of broadcast frequencies. They appear to be trying to communicate with each other, Admiral. Kairos smiled. This was always how it started. First, the primitive species would panic. Then they would beg for mercy. Then they would surrender. It was the same pattern on every world. The Empire had conquered open a channel to the planet he ordered. Let us get this over with quickly. The message was transmitted across every frequency to every communication device on Earth. The words were simple and direct as all Imperial ultimatums were: humans of Earth, surrender now or face extinction. You have 1 hour to comply on Earth. The message was received in every language in every country by every person who had access to a radio or television or computer. The reaction was immediate, but it was not what the Admiral expected in Seoul. Dr. Lee Hyen Soo was working late in his physics laboratory when the transmission came through. He stopped what he was doing and listened to the message twice. Then he picked up his phone and called his wife. Honey, he said calmly, aliens are demanding we surrender. His wife, Park Min-young, was a military engineer working on defense systems. Her response was immediate. Are they serious? Very serious, according to their message. There was a pause, then Min-young laughed. That was their first mistake around the world. Similar conversations were taking place. In Tokyo, a businessman named Tanaka looked up from his work and said to his colleague, well, this is interesting. In London, a teacher named Williams told her students class is cancelled. We have visitors in New York. A taxi driver named Rodriguez looked at his radio and said to his passenger, you hear that, buddy? We got company. The reaction was not fear, it was curiosity mixed with something that would have terrified the Zephyrians if they had understood it. It was excitement. President Kim Dae-ho called an emergency meeting of the United Earth Council. The leaders of every nation gathered in the secure bunker beneath Geneva to discuss their response. Military commanders like General Park Min-ho and Admiral Choi Soo-jin were present, along with scientists and engineers from around the world. The alien fleet is massive, reported Captain Yoon Jae-sung from the International Space Station. 500 ships, each one larger than anything we have ever built. Their weapons appear to be energy-based, and their technology is clearly centuries ahead of ours. General Park Min-ho looked at the tactical displays showing the enemy fleet. By every military calculation, we should surrender. We cannot possibly win this fight. But then something happened that the Zephyrians had not expected. President Kim Dae-ho stood up and said something that changed everything. We are not going to surrender. The room was silent for a moment. Then Admiral Choi Soo-jin smiled. I was hoping you would say that what the aliens did not understand was that they had just made the same mistake that every enemy of humanity had made throughout history. They had assumed that superior technology meant automatic victory. They had not considered that humans had been fighting impossible battles for their entire existence. In a small apartment in Bison College, student Oh Sung-min watched the news with his roommate Kim Tae-woo. The reporter was explaining that Earth was completely outgunned and that resistance was hopeless. You know what this reminds me of, Oh Sung-min said to his friend. That time we went hiking and found the bear cave. Kim Tae-woo grinned. The one where you said we should poke it with a stick to see what would happen. Exactly. This is just a bigger bear. This conversation was happening in millions of homes around the world. Humans were not cowering in fear. They were analyzing the situation and making plans. They were treating this like a problem to be solved, not a disaster to be survived. Dr. Nam-young, he worked in the emergency research center that had been set up in Seoul. She was one of thousands of scientists and engineers who had dropped everything to focus on the alien threat. Around her, people worked frantically to analyze every piece of information about the enemy fleet. Their ships use energy shields, she reported to the defense council. The good news is that all shields have weaknesses. The bad news is that we need to find them quickly. But humans had always been good at finding weaknesses. It was how they had survived on their death world for millions of years. When faced with a saber-toothed tiger, they had not tried to outrun it. They had figured out how to kill it. When faced with ice ages, they had not tried to stop them. They had figured out how to survive them in underground bunkers around the world. Military leaders were making plans that would have seemed insane to any other species. General Park Min Ho stood before a room full of officers and said something that became the motto of the resistance. We cannot match their technology, but we can match their determination. Our deadline passed and Admiral Kairos waited for Earth's surrender. Instead, he received a message that was only one word long. No. The Admiral stared at the transmission in disbelief. No. That was the entire message. No explanation, no negotiation, no begging for mercy, just a simple rejection, sir. His tactical officer reported, "We are detecting unusual activity across the planet. It appears the humans are mobilizing their military forces." Mobilizing. Admiral Kairos laughed with what their ships are. Barely capable of reaching orbit, what the Admiral did not understand was that humans had been preparing for this moment their entire history. Every human child grew up hearing stories about brave people who fought impossible odds. Every human culture celebrated heroes who stood against overwhelming enemies. David and Goliath, Leonidas at Thermopylae, the Alamo, Stalingrad. These were not just stories, they were instruction manuals. Captain Ru Heian-woo commanded the ESS Incheon, one of the hastily converted ships that formed Earth's defense fleet. His vessel had been a mining ship just days ago, but now it was loaded with nuclear missiles and crewed by volunteers who knew they were probably going to die, sir, the communications officer reported. The alien fleet is moving. They are heading directly for Earth. Captain Ru looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were scared, but they were also determined. They had families on Earth. They had homes and dreams and futures that they were not going to give up without a fight. Open a channel to all ships, he ordered. This is Captain Ru to all Earth vessels. Remember, we are not trying to win this battle. We are trying to buy time for our people to prepare. The longer we hold them here, the more chances our scientists have to find their weaknesses. The response from the other ships was immediate. Understood, Captain. We are ready. Admiral Kairos watched the human fleet approach on his tactical display. 18 ships against 500. It was not even a fair fight. The humans appeared to be using converted civilian vessels with primitive weapons. It would be a massacre. Fire at will, he ordered. Let us end this quickly. The first battle of the human-Zephyrian War began at exactly 1,400 hours Earth time. It was supposed to last 18 minutes. It lasted 18 hours. The humans fought with a desperation and creativity that the Zephyrians had never encountered. When their weapons failed, they rammed their ships into enemy vessels. When their shields were destroyed, they used their ships as missiles. When their engines were damaged, they used nuclear reactors as bombs. Captain Ru Heian-woo watched his ship fall apart around him, but he never stopped fighting. His final message to Earth was simple. Tell them we learned something important. Their shields reset every 4.7 seconds. Use that information. Every human ship that died transmitted data back to Earth. Every failed attack taught the scientists something new. The humans were treating their own deaths as experiments, and the data they provided was more valuable than any victory. When the battle finally ended, Admiral Kairos had lost 30 ships. The humans had lost all 18 of theirs, but something had changed. The human attacks had been getting more accurate, more deadly as the battle progressed, sir, his science officer reported. I have analyzed the human tactics. They were not fighting to win. They were fighting to learn. For the first time since the invasion began, Admiral Kairos felt a chill of fear. He sent a message to General Vox, request immediate reinforcements. These humans are not what we expected. The war had begun, and already the Zephyrians were learning that their enemies were far more dangerous than they had imagined. On Earth, the news of the first battle's defeat was received not with despair, but with grim satisfaction. The 18 ships had done their job. 1 year after the first battle, everything had changed. The Zephyrian Empire that had once seemed invincible was now retreating on every front. Their fleets were scattered, their supply lines were cut, and their morale was shattered. The humans had gone from desperate defenders to aggressive hunters who stalked their enemies across the galaxy. The transformation was complete. Captain Lee Yoon-ji stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Incheon, watching through the view screen as another Zephyrian fleet fled before her forces. Her ship had been built from the wreckage of alien vessels, but it was now more advanced than anything the Empire had ever created. Ma-am, her tactical officer reported, the enemy fleet is retreating to the Proxima system. Should we pursue Yunji considered the question 6 months ago? Her answer would have been yes, without hesitation. But the humans had learned something important about warfare. It was not enough to win battles, you had to win them in a way that made future battles unnecessary. No, she decided let them go, but make sure they know we could have destroyed them if we wanted to. Send a message to their commander, tell him that Admiral Cairo sends his regards. The message was a psychological weapon. As much as a military one, Admiral Kairos had been captured 3 months ago during the battle for the Vega system. He was now living comfortably in a human prison facility, being interviewed by scientists who wanted to understand Zephyrian psychology. The humans had learned that information was often more valuable than destruction on Earth. The war had created a new kind of human civilization. The old divisions between nations had disappeared, replaced by a single purpose, the defeat of the Zephyrian Empire. Every human being was now part of the war effort, whether they wore a uniform or not. Dr. Park Seo-jin worked in the research facility that had been built from a captured Zephyrian space station. Around him, hundreds of scientists from dozens of countries worked together to understand and improve alien technology. The cooperation was unprecedented in human history. The new hyperspace engines are ready, he announced to his team. We can now travel twice as fast as any Zephyrian ship. Our fleet can be anywhere in the galaxy within hours. But technology was not humanity's greatest weapon. Their greatest weapon was something the Zephyrians had never encountered before: the absolute refusal to accept defeat even when facing impossible. As humans found a way to turn disadvantages into advantages, Colonel Bae-Yoon-soo led the assault on the Zephyrian fortress world of Keth Prime. The planet was protected by massive orbital defense platforms, energy shields that could withstand nuclear weapons, and a garrison of 100,000 elite troops. His force consisted of 10,000 human marines in powered armor. By every tactical calculation, the mission was impossible. The defenders outnumbered the attackers 10-1. They had better weapons, better armor, and better defensive positions. Any sane military commander would have called off the attack, but humans had never been accused of being sane. Remember, Colonel Bay told his troops as they prepared for the assault. Impossible just means nobody has done it yet. The battle for Keth Prime lasted 3 days. It was fought in the vacuum of space, in the depths of underground bunkers, and in the corridors of orbital stations. The humans used every trick they had learned during the war. Stealth technology, captured alien weapons, and most importantly, their willingness to take risks that no other species would consider. The turning point came when Sergeant Kim Tae-woo led a squad of Marines in a direct assault on the planetary defense computer. The facility was protected by energy barriers, automated weapons, and elite guards. It should have been impregnable. But the humans had studied the facility for weeks and found something: the Zephyrians had missed a maintenance shaft that was too small for most species to use. It was barely large enough for a human in powered armor to crawl through. Kim Tae-woo and his squad spent 6 hours crawling through the shaft under enemy fire. When they finally reached the computer room, they had 30 seconds before the alarms would bring reinforcements. It was enough. Kim Tae-woo placed a small device on the main computer and activated it. The virus that the human programmers had created spread through the entire defense network in seconds. Every weapon, every shield, every automated system on the planet shut down. When the battle was over, Keth Prime belonged to humanity. The Zephyrian garrison surrendered without firing another shot. The victory sent shockwaves through the Empire. If the humans could take Keth Prime, they could take any world. The psychological impact was even greater than the military one. Zephyrian forces across the galaxy began to surrender rather than face human assault troops. General Vox stood in his command bunker deep beneath the surface of Zephyria Prime, staring at reports that painted a picture of complete disaster. The Empire was collapsing. The humans had captured 17 worlds, liberated dozens of slave species, and destroyed over half of the Imperial fleet. But the worst news was yet to come. Sir, his intelligence officer reported, we have intercepted human communications. They are not planning to stop with our military defeat. They are planning something they call the Liberation Campaign. Vox felt his blood turn to ice. Liberation Campaign. What does that mean? The officer consulted his reports. Sir, they appear to be planning to free every species the Empire has ever conquered. They want to tear down our entire civilization and replace it with something they call a galactic federation. The general stared at the report in horror. This was not how wars were supposed to end. The victor was supposed to take the place of the defeated, not destroy the entire system. Other species conquered territory or demanded tribute. The humans seemed to want to remake the galaxy itself. How is this possible? He whispered. They were a single species on a single world. How did they become so powerful so quickly? That answer came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Krell walked into the command bunker flanked by human guards. His skin was a calm blue color, the viridian expression of satisfaction. I tried to warn you, Krell said, his voice filled with quiet triumph. You asked me how a single species could threaten your empire. I told you, but you would not listen. General Vox looked at the small alien with new respect. What did we miss? What made them so dangerous? Krell's skin shifted to silver, the color of ancient wisdom. You made the same mistake that every bully makes. You thought that strength came from size and numbers and weapons, but the humans understand something you never learned. True strength comes from the willingness to never give up. The general shook his head. That cannot be enough. Many species fight to the death. No, Krell corrected him. Many species fight until death seems certain, then they surrender or they flee. The humans fight beyond death. They fight when there is no hope left. They fight because fighting is what they are. And that makes them the most dangerous force in the galaxy. As if to prove his point, alarms began sounding throughout the command center. A human fleet had appeared in the Zephyria system. It was the largest fleet in galactic history, over 5,000 ships, all of them bristling with weapons that had been impossible just 2 years ago. Admiral Han Yu-jin commanded the fleet from the bridge of the battleship Taegeuk King. The ship had been built specifically for this moment, the final assault on the Zephyrian homeworld. It was armed with weapons that could crack continents and protected by shields that could stop anything the Empire could throw at it. This is Admiral Han to all ships, she broadcast. Remember, we are not here to conquer. We are here to liberate the Zephyrian Empire. Ends today, but the Zephyrian people do not have to end with it. The final battle was not really a battle at all. The Zephyrian fleet was outnumbered, outgunned, and completely demoralized. Most of their ships surrendered without firing a shot. The few that tried to fight were destroyed so quickly that the engagement lasted less than an hour. General Vox watched from his bunker as human marines landed on the surface of Zephyria Prime. The soldiers moved with precision and purpose, but also with restraint. They could have destroyed the planet, but instead they were trying to capture it intact. The war was over. The Zephyrian Empire that had dominated the galaxy for 10,000 years had fallen to a species that had been in space for less than a century. The impossible had become inevitable, but the humans were not finished. They had won the war, but now they had to win the peace, and that would prove to be even more difficult than defeating the Empire. As human forces secured the capital city of Zephyria Prime, Admiral Han sent a message to every world in the galaxy. The message was simple, but it changed everything. To all species in the galaxy, the Zephyrian Empire has finished. The age of conquest and slavery is over. A new age of freedom and cooperation begins today. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what the humans would do next. What they did surprised everyone. 2 years after the first attack, the Zephyrian Empire was no longer the mighty force that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They were a broken civilization, fighting desperately for survival against an enemy that seemed to grow stronger. With each passing day, the humans had not just defeated them, they had learned to think like them, and then found ways to do everything better. Captain Li Yunji stood on the bridge of the human battleship Sejong King, watching as her fleet prepared for what might be the final battle of the war. Her ship had originally been the Zephyrian Dreadnought Worldbreaker, but the humans had captured it, rebuilt it, and turned it into something far more deadly than its creators had ever imagined. The irony was not lost on anyone. The ship that had once been used to destroy human colonies was now leading the fight to liberate enslaved species across the galaxy. The Zephyrian weapons had been replaced with human improvements. The alien armor had been strengthened with human engineering. The ship was now more powerful than anything the Empire had ever built. Her tactical officer reported, we are detecting a Zephyrian fleet approaching 47 ships led by their newest flagship, the final hope. Li Yunji smiled, the cold smile that had become the trademark of human commanders. Just 47. They are not trying very hard anymore. The smile was justified. The Zephyrians had learned to fear human unpredictability more than anything. else in the galaxy they no longer sent large fleets against human forces because large fleets meant large losses. They had become cautious, defensive, and most importantly afraid. The war had changed both species. But in completely different ways. The Zephyrians had become more cautious. With each defeat, they planned their attacks more carefully. They used better tactics. They tried to avoid direct confrontation whenever possible. They had learned to fight smarter. The humans had become more aggressive. With each victory, they had learned that the Zephyrians could be beaten, and now they actively hunted enemy fleets across the galaxy. They no longer fought defensive battles. They sought out their enemies and destroyed them wherever they found them. They had learned to fight harder. On the imperial homeworld of Zephyria, Prime General Vox stood before the Supreme Council in a chamber that had once been filled with the confident voices of conquerors. Now it was filled with the desperate whispers of the defeated. The crystal walls that had once sparkled with the light of 1,000 conquered worlds now seemed dim and lifeless. The humans have taken 17 of our worlds, he reported to the assembled leaders. His voice was hollow and defeated, completely different from the confident roar that had once filled the chamber. Our fleets are scattered, our supply lines are cut, and our morale is shattered. Council member Zor leaned forward, his scaled face showing the strain of 2 years of constant defeat. How is this possible, General? They are a single species from a single world. We have conquered hundreds of species that controlled entire star systems. That is what we thought, General. Vox replied, his voice filled with bitter experience. But we were wrong. They are not just one species. They are 100 different cultures, united by one thing: the absolute refusal to accept defeat. When we attacked them, we did not just attack humanity. We attacked every dream, every hope, every story of courage they had ever told themselves. The council members looked at each other with growing horror. They had received reports from the front lines that seemed impossible to believe. Stories of human soldiers who fought for days without rest, human ships that continued attacking even after their life support systems failed, human colonies that would choose complete destruction rather than surrender to Imperial forces. Sir General Vox continued, we have intercepted human communications. They do not speak of victory or defeat. They speak of something they call the long war. They are prepared to fight us for centuries if necessary. They view this conflict not as a war but as a test of survival. What the Zephyrians could not understand was that humanity had always been preparing for this war. Every human myth, every story of heroes facing impossible odds, every tale of the underdog winning through pure determination had been preparing them for this moment. These were not just stories. They were training manuals for a species that refused to give up. Dr. Park Seo Jun worked in the captured Zephyrian research facility on Titan, surrounded by technology that had once been beyond human understanding. Around him, hundreds of scientists from Earth worked to not just understand alien technology but to improve it in ways its creators had never imagined. The new hyperspace engines are ready, he announced to his team. We can now travel 3 times faster than any Zephyrian ship. Our fleets can strike anywhere in the galaxy and be gone before the enemy can respond. But technology was not humanity's greatest weapon. Their greatest weapon was something the Zephyrians had never encountered in 10,000 years of conquest: the absolute refusal to accept that anything was impossible. Colonel Bei Yun-Su led the assault on the Zephyrian fortress world of Drakmor Prime. The planet was supposed to be impregnable. It was protected by orbital defense platforms that could destroy entire fleets, energy shields that could withstand nuclear bombardment, and a garrison of 500,000 elite troops. His force consisted of 50,000 human marines in powered armor, supported by captured alien technology and human improvements. By every tactical calculation, the mission was impossible. The defenders outnumbered the attackers 10 to 1. They had better defensive positions and weapons that had been designed specifically to kill humans. But Colonel Bei had studied the planet for months and found something the Zephyrians had missed. The orbital defense platforms were powered by a central reactor that was vulnerable to a specific type of electromagnetic pulse. The energy shields had a reset cycle that left them vulnerable for exactly 0.3 seconds every hour. The garrison was spread across the planet, which meant they could not concentrate their forces effectively. Remember, he told his troops as they prepared for the assault, impossible just means nobody has done it yet. We are not here to do the possible, we are here to do the necessary. The assault on Drakmor Prime lasted 6 days. It was fought in the vacuum of space, in the depths of underground bunkers, and in the corridors of orbital stations. The humans used every lesson they had learned during the war. Every captured technology, every improved weapon, every tactical innovation that had been bought with blood and sacrifice. The turning point came when Sergeant Park G1 led a squad of Marines in a direct assault on the planetary defense computer. The facility was buried 3 miles beneath the surface of the planet and protected by automated weapon systems that had never been defeated, but the humans had brought something new to the battle, a virus that had been designed specifically to attack Zephyrian computer systems. It had taken months to develop and could only be delivered by direct contact with the main computer. Park G1 and his squad fought their way through 3 miles of tunnels under constant enemy fire. When they finally reached the computer room, they had less than 2 minutes before reinforcements would arrive. It was enough. Park G1 connected the virus to the main computer and watched as every defense system on the planet began to shut down. The orbital platforms stopped firing, the energy shields collapsed, and the automated weapons fell silent. When the battle was over, Drakmor Prime belonged to humanity. The Zephyrian garrison surrendered without firing another shot. The victory sent shockwaves through what remained of the Empire. If the humans could take Drakmor Prime, they could take any world. The psychological impact was devastating. Zephyrian forces across the galaxy began to surrender rather than face human assault troops. But the most terrifying thing about the humans was not their military prowess. It was their treatment of prisoners. Every Zephyrian who surrendered expected to be executed or enslaved, as was traditional in galactic warfare. Instead, they were fed, given medical care, and most surprisingly interviewed. The humans wanted to understand their enemies. They asked questions about Zephyrian culture, psychology, technology, and military doctrine. They were not content to simply defeat the Empire. They wanted to understand why it had existed and how to prevent it from happening again. Commander Keth was a Zephyrian naval officer who had been captured during the battle for the Vega system. He expected torture and death. Instead, he found himself in a comfortable cell, being visited daily by human researchers who asked him about his life, his beliefs, and his understanding of the war. Why do you want to know these things? He asked Dr. Kim Min-soo, the human psychologist who interviewed him. You have already defeated us. What more do you want? Dr. Kim Min-soo smiled sadly. We want to understand you, Commander. We want to know why your people chose conquest over cooperation. We want to make sure this never happens again. This was what truly terrified the Zephyrians, the humans. 5 years after Ambassador Krell had first warned the Zephyrian Empire about the dangers of attacking humanity, the galaxy had been completely transformed. The great crystal chamber where that warning had been ignored was now the meeting hall of the Galactic Federation, and the throne where General Vox had once sat in arrogant confidence was now occupied by representatives from dozens of species. Working together as equals, Admiral Han Yu-jin stood at the podium where Zephyrian war leaders had once planned their conquests, but her message was completely different from anything that had ever been spoken in this chamber. She wore the uniform of the Terran Space Forces, but the insignia on her collar represented not human authority, but service to the Federation of Free Worlds. The Zephyrian Empire has agreed to unconditional surrender, she announced to the assembled representatives. All occupied worlds will be returned to their original inhabitants. All enslaved species will be freed immediately. The Empire will pay reparations for the damage they have caused and will assist in the rebuilding of worlds they have destroyed. The chamber erupted in celebration. Representatives from species that had been enslaved for centuries wept with joy as they heard that their people would finally be free. The Viridians flashed brilliant gold patterns across their skin, the color of ultimate happiness. The Korathi, who had no emotions except anger, actually smiled. The Drakneri, who were known for their cruelty, embraced each other with tears in their eyes. But what happened next surprised everyone in the galaxy. The humans who had won the war and could have claimed the right to rule over their defeated enemies did something that no conquering species had ever done in galactic history. They refused to become rulers. President Kim Dae-ho stepped forward to address the assembly. His words would be remembered for thousands of years as the moment when the galaxy changed forever. Humanity has no interest in ruling over other species. We fought this war because we were attacked, not because we wanted an empire. Our goal is simple: a galaxy where every species can live in peace and freedom. The representative stared at him in amazement. Every other species that had defeated the Zephyrians had simply replaced them as the dominant power. The cycle of conquest and domination had continued for millions of years, but the humans were offering something completely different. They were offering freedom. Ambassador Krell, who had survived the war and witnessed the transformation of the galaxy, rose from his seat. His skin flashed the deep blue patterns of profound truth. In all my years, I have never seen anything like this. You have the power to rule the galaxy. Why do you choose not to? Captain Yoon Jae-sung, who had been one of the first humans to see the alien fleet, now served as Earth representative to the new Galactic Council, smiled with the same confidence that had carried humanity through the darkest days of the war, because ruling people is not the same as leading them. We learned that lesson on our own world, sometimes the hard way. The war had indeed changed everything. The Zephyrian Empire was gone, replaced by a federation of free worlds. Human technology had advanced by centuries in just 5 years, but most importantly, humanity had gained something they had never had before: the respect and friendship of hundreds of alien species. Dr. Lee Hyun-soo, the scientist who had received the first alien transmission, now worked alongside researchers from dozens of species in laboratories that had been unimaginable just years before. Together, they were developing technologies that would benefit everyone. Rather than being used as weapons of conquest, the galaxy is a dangerous place, he explained to a group of young alien scientists who had come to Earth to study, but it is also full of possibilities. Humans learned long ago that the greatest dangers often come from fear and ignorance. We choose to face the unknown with curiosity rather than hostility. The new galactic civilization was built on principles that were uniquely human but universally appealing. The idea that every being deserved a chance to succeed, that no problem was too difficult to solve if approached with determination and cooperation, that strength should be used to protect rather than to exploit. As the years passed, other species began to adopt human approaches to problem solving. They learned to see failure as a learning opportunity rather than a disaster. They learned to face impossible odds with determination rather than despair. They learned that cooperation could achieve things that conquest never could. The Viridian merchants, who had once been terrified of everything, became explorers eager to discover new worlds and new species. The Karathi warriors, who had known only anger, learned to channel their strength into protection rather than destruction. The Draknari, who had been cruel and violent, discovered the satisfaction of building rather than destroying. But perhaps the most remarkable transformation occurred among the Zephyrians themselves. The species that had once been the galaxy's greatest conquerors slowly learned to become its greatest peacemakers. General Vox, who had ignored the warnings about humanity, now worked as an advisor to the galactic peacekeeping force. His knowledge of military tactics was invaluable, but he used it to prevent wars rather than to start them. He had learned the hardest lesson of all, that true strength came from knowing when not to fight. Commander Vox's son became one of the first Zephyrians to join the Galactic Exploration Service. He led missions to discover new worlds and new species, but unlike the old Imperial expeditions, these missions came in peace. They offered friendship and cooperation rather than conquest and slavery. The transformation was not easy. Many Zephyrians struggled to adapt to a galaxy where strength was measured by what you built rather than what you destroyed. Some left Zephyrian space entirely to join human colonies where they could learn new ways of living. Others stayed and worked to rebuild their civilization on principles of cooperation rather than domination. Dr. Park Seo-jun, who had worked to reverse engineer Zephyrian technology during the war, now led joint research projects between human and Zephyrian scientists. Together they developed technologies that seemed magical to earlier generations: medical treatments that could cure diseases that had plagued species for millennia, transportation systems that could carry people between stars in hours rather than years, communication networks that allowed instant contact across the galaxy. But the humans' greatest achievement was not technological, it was social. They had proven that the cycle of conquest and domination that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years could be broken. They had shown that there was an alternative to the rule of the strong over the weak. The Galactic Federation grew rapidly as more and more species chose cooperation over conflict. Within 10 years, it included over 1,000 worlds and dozens of species. The old imperial territories were transformed from slave worlds into thriving, independent societies. Captain Li Yunji, who had commanded human fleets during the war, now led the Galactic Patrol, a multi-species force dedicated to protecting peaceful worlds from pirates, raiders, and other threats. Her ship, the Federation, was crewed by beings from 20 different species, all working together as equals. The galaxy has become a better place, she told a group of young cadets from various species, but it requires constant vigilance. Freedom is not something you win once and keep forever. It is something you must choose every day. The new galactic civilization faced many challenges: pirate fleets that refused to accept the new order, isolated species that still believed in conquest, resource shortages that required careful management, technological problems that required innovative solutions. But for the first time in galactic history, these challenges were met by cooperation rather than conflict. Species that had been enemies for millennia worked together to solve problems that none of them could have solved alone. The humans had kept their promise. They had used their victory not to create a new empire, but to create something that had never existed before, a galaxy where every species could live in freedom and dignity, where problems was solved through cooperation rather than conquest, where strength was used to protect rather than to exploit. Ambassador Krell now served as the Federation diplomatic Corps' elder advisor. His long experience as a merchant and peacemaker made him invaluable in negotiations with species that were still learning to trust others. The humans taught us something that no other species ever understood, he often told new ambassadors. They showed us that the most dangerous thing in the galaxy is not a powerful enemy. It is the belief that problems cannot be solved through peaceful means. As the years passed, the war between humanity and the Zephyrian Empire became history, but it was history that was taught in schools across the galaxy as an example of how a small group of determined beings could change the course of civilization. Children of dozens of species learned about the humans who refused to surrender. Even when facing impossible odds, they learned about the importance of cooperation over competition, of building rather than destroying, of protecting rather than conquering. The galaxy that had once been ruled by fear was now guided by hope. The age of empires was over. The age of cooperation had begun, and it all started because one species refused to accept that anything was impossible and used that refusal to make the universe a better place for everyone. The war was over, but humanity greatest adventure was just beginning.